Hey guys, today we are planting bearded iris. Now, bearded iris are one of my favorite flowers, not just because they're so beautiful, but because they are so carefree. Literally, there's almost nothing you can do to kill them, and just a little bit you can do to help them put on an incredible show. So I brought these pots here, pots of iris, from our old house. They sat in these pots for 14 months now, through 2 really hot summers with very minimal water. Incidentally, there are several species of iris. Some live in boggy conditions and can't get enough water, but not the bearded iris. They're called bearded iris because on the falls or the lower petals, they have these fuzzy little beards. I've established here, just to keep them alive, is no-brainer. Unless you overwater them, they can rot. So just remember, they would rather be literally bone dry than too wet. Now, I knew I wanted to put them up here in the cottage garden, but until this week there was no cottage garden, so they've been patiently waiting. If you look behind me, you can see we've done quite a bit on the cottage English cottage chicken coop. We're about ready to get the stucco going. That'll be next week. But I have been working to get the terracing done, at least in a good portion of it. So I now have a place to plant these. And like I said, they've been patiently waiting. So today's the day. There's a couple of times of year where you can plant them, and there's a couple of different ways that you can plant them. You can plant them bare root, and that just means they have no soil on them. They look like this. You might see some green leaves coming out. I have to admit, I went yesterday to Lowe's to get some of these. They only had like 5 left, and this was the best looking one of the 5, and it's questionable. But I got it anyway because I wanted to show you what bare root planting was like. So the anatomy of an iris is you've got the roots down here. This is not the root. This is the rhizome. And then you've got the leaves. So the roots collect moisture and nutrients that are stored in the rhizome for use by the leaves and the flowers. So when you buy your iris bare root, you might see a little green here. This has very, very little green, but you might not. And as long as the rhizome is firm and kind of feels a little heavier than it should, it's probably going to be okay. Like I said, this one was a little beyond, but I still think that this can pull out of it. The best time to plant irises bare root is about 2 months before you get really cold weather. You want them to establish some roots before the ground freezes, so it might be a little late for some of you who have freezing winters. For those of you who have mild winters like me, now is the time, preferably a month ago when they actually had more on the shelves, now is the time to get the bare root irises into the ground. Now when you're planting bare root irises, the roots need to go underground. The rhizome should not. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to kind of fan the roots out that are there, whether they're viable or not. They're going to help to anchor the rhizome in place. And you're going to cover those with soil, but you're going to leave the back of the rhizome out of the ground. Irises like to have their rhizome be baked in the hot sun. So you want to, whenever possible, leave that top of that rhizome showing on top of the ground. So it's pretty easy to plant bare root. The other way you can plant is a potted iris, just like these that I have. When you take the iris out of the pot, you're going to see that it already has its rhizome, hopefully, out of the soil, and then all the roots are down there below it. So it's really simple. All you have to do is dig a slight depression the size of the root ball and cover up the roots, leaving the rhizome out of the soil. Now you can plant potted irises at any time of year as long as the ground isn't frozen and as long as you are in zone 4 and above. In the spring, they'll start to really put on growth and then send up their bloom stalks in the summer. Now, no matter which way you plant them, there's 2 things that bearded iris need, and that is good hot sun and really good drainage. They take well to little water, as I've said, so they're really drought tolerant. Now they do have these short sword type leaves, That's about as tall as they get, maybe a few inches taller. However, the blooms are carried on 2 to 3 foot stems, well above the leaf height. So they don't need to be planted in the front of a border or next to a path to be seen. Another great thing about bearded irises is they multiply every year and should be divided every 3 or 4 years, as they don't bloom as well when they feel cramped. So I've got a few different varieties here. Unfortunately, most of the labels were lost between the old house and here a year later, and this one that does have a label, the name is completely worn off. So I'll plant these together as they are in these pots, and then once they bloom, I know the varieties, so once they bloom, I'll be able to relabel them. And I do recommend, if at all possible, that you get multiples of the same variety to plant, so you get a little bit bigger show right off the bat. If you plant one here, one there of different kinds, you don't get quite the pop as when you have a group of them. And so I bought 3 of these, 3 of each type. So when you're actually planting the iris, there's a couple things you need to know about the way they will grow. One end of this rhizome is blank and one end has the leaves. The growth is only going to come out of this end of the rhizome. It's never going to change. And that's also the way the blooms are going to grow. So when you're planting them, know which way to face them. And another thing to know about the rhizome itself, the rhizome stores nutrients, stores water. It does not collect nutrients and water from the ground. That's what the roots do. You also want to know that iris grow outward from the center of the clump. They're eventually going to grow out and leave nothing in the center but dry, dead rhizome pieces. And that can be taken care of in 3 or 4 years when you actually divide the clump. You can just get rid of all of that, separate all the rhizomes, and replant. Now, if you're planting these in the ground and you have clay soil or heavy soil, you're going to want to add a bit of sand or perlite or grit, something that's going to make it more porous and make the soil better draining. If you have sandy soil already, they're going to love it. So as you can see, I've got them all planted. You can see the rhizome on each one. You cannot see any of the roots, though they're underground, to be able to pull in all that water and nutrients into that rhizome. And the rhizome is out to the sun to start baking. That hot sun is really going to propel the growth and flowering next spring and summer. Sometimes with bare root planting, or if you divide your own and plant them, they can be a little bit rocky. And especially when they have these long leaves, the wind could catch them and actually pull the rhizome right over. So it's not going to hurt to just take some scissors and cut them off about 4 to 6 inches above ground level. Now, if you grow bearded iris and you have some more tips you'd like to share, we would love to hear them down in the comments. If you have any questions, please leave those there as well. If you learned something, please give the video a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Pass it along, share it with a friend on one of your social networks. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing that. I'll see you guys next time.